Welcome to today's episode of the Grind Road to Success podcast, the place to be if you want to learn how to set yourself apart from the competition and reach your highest potential. I'm your host, Zak, and if you haven't already yet, hit the subscribe button so you never miss out on another podcast episode and the many tips, tricks, and strategies that can help you reach your highest potential. Without further ado, let's get into it. So welcome back to another episode of the Grind Road to Success podcast, where we talk with other athletes, coaches, and professionals, gaining new insights and perspectives on how you can begin performing at your highest potential. Today, we have the pleasure to sit down and talk with former elite athlete, baseball coach, and owner of RBI Athlete Training Center, Chris Untereiner. Chris competed in the Canada Cup and Summer Games, where he eventually competed at the collegiate level with Monterey, Peninsula, and Long Island University. After a successful college career on the field, Chris took his baseball careers overseas, where he competed in the German and Australian professional baseball leagues. With many accomplishments and awards to his name, Chris now operates and owns RBI Training Center, helping baseball and softball athletes train year-round and helping them develop elite-level skills. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Let's dive right into things. Tell us a bit about your experience as an athlete kind of growing up, and what led you to the position you are today.
So born and raised in Regina, played ball all the way through probably 4 years old, I guess. It was one of those things that I played a bunch of sports, but I kind of knew baseball was going to be the route I went. I was pretty fortunate to be part of Team Sask from a very young age. I think Bantam Selects, when it existed at the time, 15 and under. I was one of the catchers, and I played Team Sask all the way through nationals, like you had mentioned, Canada Cup, Canada Summer Games. And then I was fortunate to have some connections down in California. There was a little bit of a pipeline with some Sask baseball players down in Monterey. So there was 3 of us that went down in 2009, the fall of 2009. 3 little Canadian boys rolling in, stealing spots of the Americans down in California. That was an eye-opening experience for sure, because you go in and, in Saskatchewan, you're a big fish in a small pond, and then all of a sudden you go down to California where everybody is just as talented, if not more. And obviously we'll dive in a little bit more mindset wise and what that meant for us as Canadians rolling in. But 2 years in California. So I was a Monterey Peninsula Community College, and then I was fortunate to get an academic scholarship to Long Island University in Brooklyn. So I went from the West Coast to the East Coast. A good chunk of my education was paid for at LIU, which is good because it's not a cheap education. And played 2 years there. Academic All-American, scholar athlete. I was big into education. Baseball was, I guess, a bonus, we'll call it. And I was fortunate to have awesome coaches that way too. So I developed my skills. I went down as a catcher, ended up as a third baseman. It's all about being a utility man. I tell all our kids all the time, you want to be great at multiple positions, so that way you give your coaches an opportunity to get you in the lineup no matter what. So that worked out for me there. And then, I came home. So that would be 2013. Came home, started part-time at RBI. So RBI opened their doors in 2012 as just kind of a lesson-based private lessons, small groups. There wasn't really any programs or anything like that. I came in and helped out part-time. And I was still only 22 because I graduated, didn't redshirt, nothing like that. So I was 22, still in what I figured was good enough shape to play baseball. So I started sending my resume out to some of the independent leagues down in the States and got some interest that way. But I didn't really want to, for lack of a better word, grind it out to get $150 a week and, live on a cot in a motel or whatever it is. So I wanted to experience what the world had to offer in baseball. And I had a line on the German league with one of my assistant coaches from Monterey. So got on there. That was probably the coolest 6 months besides Australia. So we'll say the coolest year of baseball. But in Germany, you're a train stop away from 3 different countries in less than an hour. So you play ball for 4 days a week and you travel for 2 or 3 and you do it all over again for 6 months. And then, came home for 2 weeks and then shipped off to Australia for another 5.5, 6 months. So all in, it was about a year of just traveling the world and playing a little bit of baseball. And so then that would have been 2014. Got home 2014, 2015, and then I took over full time at RBI. Our owner at the time approached me and wanted me to kind of take the reins of the facility and take care of the player development and the everyday operations of the facility. And it's been 7, going on 8 years, I guess, full time doing this. So I get to share my love of the game from being a player all those years. I still play a little bit of men's league, as you know, Zach. But now it's instructing.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a great experience being able to travel the world, play the game you love, especially at that elite level. What were some of, the lessons you learned throughout that process from the youth years to competing at those professional levels you eventually did?
The biggest thing for me is I was very routine based from a young age. I had coaches that preached that, and that kind of speaks to the mental side of it. Even though at the time I never really factored in mental versus physical, I just kind of always stuck to a routine. And, the moment I kind of got that first phone call for Bantam Selects with Team Sask was one of those, okay, maybe there is an opportunity to to play ball more than just 3 months of the year. And I knew going in, and it's still the case, as you know, Zach, the province, the country in general, I guess, really, we're very shy on quality catchers. That's the fastest way to work your way up from the lowest level up to however high you get up in development and pro or college or whatever it is. That's one of the quickest routes, is as a catcher. So I knew I loved the position, and I was always going to be one of 2 or 3 that were competing for a starting spot, starting in 15U Bantam Selects. And then I just knew, keep it up. And then getting to Monterey, the biggest thing I learned was, as I mentioned kind of initially, was you want to be valuable to your coach, whatever that means. Just find a way to get yourself in the lineup. And it wasn't until about halfway through my first season in Monterey that my coach realized that I'm not just a catcher. I can play wherever. So that's when they started working me out at third base. And then it's funny, actually, I was down in California this summer, and I met up with my coach. I hadn't seen him in a few years. He's still there. He's going on 20 years in Monterey. He's still there. And he said one of his only regrets in all of his years as a head coach in Monterey was, and maybe he's probably just telling me this story because it's me. He said, it took him too long to realize that I could play somewhere else. And I think there's a lot of players that cut themselves off of that opportunity because they say, oh, I'm just a shortstop, or I'm just a first baseman, or I'm just a right fielder, or just a center fielder. It's like, well, you might be now, but at the next level, there might be 10 of those guys. What are you going to do to separate yourself? So the biggest thing for me that I learned going from that Team Sask, big fish, small pond, to Monterey Peninsula Community College, California Junior College League, which is one of the best in the country down in the States, was figure out a way to get in the lineup. If you can hit, you're going to play, and the coach is going to find a spot to put you in. And that's where I ended up playing more innings at third base in my college and my overseas professional career than I did catching, even though I was a catcher. I'd come home, play Regina Red Sox in the Western Baseball League, and I'd catch, but then I'd go back down to the States and I'd play third base because our teams needed a guy that could do it. So I think that was the biggest thing, development-wise, developing from I played a little bit of infield, but I caught, to I guess I catch a little bit and I play a lot of infield. And that'll be my biggest message to any kid is don't pigeonhole yourself at a young age, because you just never know. You could become that guy at 22 years old.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree on that. That development process, especially is huge in the long run, right? You may not peak or reach your highest potential until, like you say, you're 22 years old. I know at least in the baseball world, like baseball specific, is you don't peak until you're 27 years of age. So when you really think about that, right, when you're super young, if you're not getting the results you want yet, just stick to the process, keep putting in the work, because you're not going to be able to achieve your full potential and reach your full strength until you're further along in your career. And so much can change along that process too. Like you say, at the college level, right? They may switch positions. I know in baseball, that's a huge thing. There's lots of MLB players that used to play different positions in college in their youth years as well. And that, can apply to any sports as well. But yeah, kind of walk me through that development process that you guys really utilize, especially at RBI. What do you need to do to be able to help athletes set themselves apart from the competition and help them be able to reach their full potential, especially over the long run?
A big thing that we focus on in general, all of our coaches, I should say, are the reason why they're fantastic instructors is that the game didn't necessarily come easy to them. It's like teachers. The best teachers in schools are the ones that weren't necessarily the best students. That education didn't come easy to them. The game of baseball, as an instructor, or for that matter, any sport, the best coaches are typically the ones that had to work extra hard at getting to that level, whether it's physically or mentally, or obviously both. And all of our coaches, they're fantastic baseball players. I'm not going to take that away from them, but they all had to work hard at it. They had to run through that process, build themselves up to the level that they got to, versus it just grabbing a baseball and being able to throw 90 miles an hour, which we really put forth to these kids, saying like, if you want to, and this we'll probably get into this a little bit later, if you want to compete at the next level and you want to do the tournaments and the travel thing and this and that, you have to get to that level first. You can't just put your name in the hat or pay a fee and you're on the team. You want to be able to earn it. You want to be able to say that you put every ounce of your effort and energy into getting to that level. That carrot dangling in front of you is that motivation, but it doesn't mean that you just automatically deserve it because your name is there. Put the work in, physically in the weight room, on the turf, mentally before all of that. And that's the biggest thing we instill in these guys is you want to see your numbers blow up. You want to see the velocities and all the stuff that everybody's caught up in right now. It takes that work off the turf, when you're at home, when nobody's watching, when you're in the weight room, when you're sitting on your phone scrolling, instead of just aimlessly scrolling on Instagram. If you want to scroll, look up some of the best swings in the world. Look up some of the throwing mechanics. Look up some of the field. Like, there's so many cool educational opportunities where these kids are probably scrolling right past it because it's not funny or whatever on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook. It's like you can learn on those same platforms, and we use it all the time in our facility, in our programs. And I think that's where I like to think we set ourselves apart, because it's well beyond the physical part that we talk about. Sure, they get their swings, they get their reps, they get this and that, but we try to really preach the why. Why are you swinging at this pitch and not this pitch? Why are we doing this for our mechanical changes and maybe not this? We don't just stick to that cookie cutter. Hey, I was successful throwing this way, so that means you have to be. Or I was successful hitting this way, that means you have to be. No, there's hundreds of right ways to do things. Our our job as instructors, as coaches, are to figure out which way we need to educate these kids and, find that little niche that's going to make sure that they get to that next level. And I like to think that our coaches do a pretty good job of that.
That's awesome. And yeah, I just want to touch a bit on that why piece, because that's a huge part, especially if you want to see success over the long term, whether you're an athlete or not. But, what is your purpose? What is the intention, especially when it comes to practice, and games, of course, but what is your intention when you get there? What is your purpose for this drill or activity? And are you actually getting better? Because that's a big thing I realized, especially getting to that college level. My experience comes from, like yourself, playing college baseball. But I would go to practice some days and, just hit off a tee a bunch and just put another ball on, another hack, and just do that 100 times over. And I remember my coach came up to me one day. He's like, "Why are you taking a million swings? Like, are you actually getting better? What is your intention? What's your purpose with this?" And I didn't even really think about it. And I just thought, oh, I'm just hitting to get better. Like, right, more practice and I'll get better. And sure, of course, more reps, right? It'll help you in the long run, but you got to have intention with every single rep you do. Otherwise, you're not getting better. And that's a big thing I realized, especially at that next level, is yeah, just that importance of coming to the field, whether it's a practice game or an exam for that example, is coming prepared, right? You have your intention, you know why you're here, and you know what you need to work on and develop so you can, get the results you want and actually see success at the next level rather than just showing up and hoping to, perform well. So, relating to that game versus practice piece, what can athletes do, whether it's baseball or not, to stay more consistent? And how important is the mindset piece with that as well?
To definitely touch on the game versus practice, as you know, and probably the majority of the sporting world knows, is we spend far too much time in game setting and not enough time in development and practice. There's lots of numbers that get thrown out, but I was fortunate over the last 5 or 6 years. I still am involved with the baseball SAS program, but I was a coach in the 13U selects. And one of the things that we talk about during our certifications and getting everything prepped is that at that age, 13U, obviously, as you get a little older, the ratios change, but they should be spending 70 to 80% of their time in practice settings and 20 to 30% of their time in game settings. But if you look at a regular 13U or 15U schedule over the course of late April, May, June, July, August, in that 4 to 5 months, they could be playing 50 to 60 baseball games. And I'm just talking baseball, obviously other sports factor in as well. But if a kid really wants to develop and perform at the next level, working up from 13 to 15 to 18U into college, it's not about all the games. Yeah, the kids in the States play 100 plus games a year because of the weather. But they're getting caught up in just playing 5 games a weekend plus 2 or 3 games during the week. We're playing like 7 games in 7 days. Some of these teams that we play against when we take teams down. And then everybody thinks when they come back home, well, we need to play more baseball. It's like, well, or if you want to develop your skills, because baseball is such an individual team sport, if you want to be better individually, it's about the training. And I'm not going to say, hey, come pay us because this is how I make a living. This is just me from a coach saying we need to develop players instead of just play baseball, right? So in terms of that ratio thing, yeah, as you get a little bit older, it's really important to just try to promote more development for these kids. And I hope coaches start to buy into that a little bit more. But Twitter baseball just seems to be blowing everybody up, and they just figure it's big numbers and lots of games. But in terms of the mindset part of things, like developing those kids in that game versus practice, and if they're not on the field, what are they doing? It gets back to that, if you've got downtime, find a way to engage your mind in the game itself, even if it doesn't mean that you're actually performing in the game. Watch baseball instead of watching aimless TV. Watch how the best in the world play the sport. You can get a lot just by soaking it in, even if you're not 100% paying attention, because I think we can all admit that 9 innings can be tough to watch unless you're really into it. But you can see the nuances of how the catcher sets up and how they give signs and how the pitcher holds runners on, or how the position players shift. Obviously, that's going to be going away this year, but just the things that you might not experience until you actually get yourself into that setting. But if you thought about, oh, hey, I'm playing third base and there's a righty hitter and my pitcher's throwing a little bit softer, maybe it's worth shifting over 1 or 2 steps to the foul line because maybe he's going to be a little bit earlier on this ball. Or, that all starts, yes, paying attention to the game that you're playing, but that starts even before that with just seeing how the big leaguers do it, or go to an 18U AAA game in Regina or Saskatoon or wherever you are. Go to a college game if you have the opportunity to do that. Just the kids don't need to always be physically performing the sport, performing the skill. They just need to try to get themselves engaged. And then when they do get that, remind themselves that the failure part of it, if failure happens, failure is part of it. Remind yourself why you're doing it. Why is it okay to fail in December? Well, because it's December, and if we're not challenging ourselves now, how are we supposed to succeed come mid to late July in provincials or nationals or whatever tournament they're at? Well, it all started when they failed 6 months ago. And then mentally we're able to handle the fact that they failed 6 months ago.
Yeah, no, those are some interesting points, and I just want to kind of backtrack a bit, especially relating to like talking about technology and social media, because I know every athlete, young athlete, has it and uses it. And yeah, like you say, social media or just technology in general, it can be the best thing in the world, but it can also be the worst thing in the world. And 99% of people, right, use it for entertainment, and just watching, yeah, useless, stupid videos, whether it's on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, whatever it may be. But it can also be a huge tool, especially if you're an athlete, to gain an edge over your competition. So if you're, like you say, watching videos and actually analyzing different techniques, skills, swings, shots, you can start to identify what the greats do and utilize that to your game. But I just want to kind of give some piece of advice from my own experience is social media, and this is for anyone in general, social media especially, they all have algorithms where they're going to push more content that you constantly like. So here's the thing is if you're watching stupid, useless videos all day, it's going to push more of that to you. Here's how you can use social media and YouTube, for example. Watch videos that are actually beneficial, like Chris is talking about here. Analyze different games, different skills, different athletes, right? The more videos, the more content you watch in that sense, the more it's going to push that, and the algorithm's going to give you more content that can actually help you. So that's just a little piece of advice, especially on the social media side, is it can be a huge tool if you actually know how to use it. But you got to be able to, train that algorithm to actually give you useful content rather than just mind-numbing stuff every day. So that was just kind of one piece there. But then, yeah, talking on that failure piece, that's another thing that so many athletes struggle with. And I did myself growing up. Like I was a perfectionist. I don't know if you can relate to that as an athlete. But where I was super tough on myself or I couldn't fail, essentially. Failure was the worst thing in the world. And it was super tough to navigate that, especially on that mindset piece where, yeah, I get down on myself. I'd go into that negative mindset. I'd keep spiraling and I'd end up playing worse throughout the game, or just being, yeah, so in my head where I couldn't really perform, whether that's in a game or an exam as well. But yeah, just understanding, we need to push past our limits. We need to step outside their comfort zone in order to grow. So in that process, we're going to fail, like you say, and probably numerous times throughout that process. But if we can develop that good mindset piece, that's where you're able to navigate those failures. You're able to stay positive and push through them. And if you keep doing that, keep making those adjustments, those pivots, and learning from those failures, that's where you can continue to grow and see massive success, especially as an athlete, if you want to get to that next level. But yeah, how important was that kind of the mental side to your game growing up and competing at those elite levels?
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, like I said, it was one of those things that I was routine based early on, and before I even realized that, um, that's a huge part of the game. Um, I actually still to this day, I've got one of my original third baseman gloves, and I can say that because I only started playing third base full time in 2019, or sorry, 2009. I actually took a black Sharpie and I wrote "relaxed equals routine" right on the thumb. And to this day, I still follow this routine, even in men's league baseball. I'm 31 years old, I'm playing a 2-hour game and then sitting in the clubhouse and probably spending more time with the boys than on the field. But I did this from the time I was 15 years old. I would have little quotes in my hat. It was winners never quit, quitters never win, and relax equals routine, and just different things that kind of get you back to reality. The game moves really fast and it can be really overwhelming. And, you start working your way from that 15U to 18U to college, and the game goes this much faster, this much faster, this much faster. And then, how can you find yourself reining it back in? And the first thing that we tell our athletes is, hey, did you remember to breathe? Oh yeah. Take a deep breath. And all of a sudden, your round that was, it's fastballs down the middle and you're shanking balls, you're fouling it off this way, rolling over, whatever. You take a deep breath and all of a sudden your round's cleaned up and you forget about the bad. That's all it takes. You learn from the negative, but you celebrate the positive, and even the small wins, because baseball is such a failure-driven game that you need to celebrate the little positives too. And for me, it's having that routine of even just little quotes that seem quirky and seem a little weird, but it kind of just keeps you reined in. And then the deep breath, deep breathing, and it just gets you back on track, and it reminds you where you're at, and you remember what day it is and what time it is, and you're not thinking about the championship game when it's 2 months away. You're just worried about executing this pitch or fielding this ground ball or sticking to your plan.
Yeah, 100%. Especially that breath work and that mindfulness piece is huge. Being able to stay in the moment, and calm yourself down when things are getting super stressful, hectic, right? Because that always happens in game situations, especially as you get to those higher levels. It happens almost every game or every day, but being able to manage it, where you can come back to the present moment saying, all right, this is all that matters. Let's focus on this. What can we control? All right. So yeah, like you say, being able to, take deep breaths or use affirmations to get yourself locked in, whether that's before the game or in the middle of the game, like you say, you can just take a moment to yourself, go to the edge of the bench, go for a quick walk if you need, whatever it may be, and just set your intention. All right. This is what I'm doing to get locked in, confident and focused. Here we go. I'm going to play the best I can play right now. And yeah, just being able to stay calm throughout that process, especially when things don't go the way you want, right? Because we're all going to have off games, but being able to stay in the game and bounce back rather than just spiraling, going down that negative loophole, and you make more mistakes, more errors, throughout the game or long term. So yeah, that's a super, super important piece there. So, what can athletes do to increase their odds and chances of competing at that collegiate level or competing at the professionals levels one day? What can athletes do to be able to set themselves apart from the competition moving forward?
We're dealing with this with quite a few players right now because, you know, getting to the back end of the year, obviously, we're 11 days away from the new year, and all these seniors in high school are starting to stress that they haven't committed yet because everybody's committing and doing this and that. And, we got to rein them in because it's not the end of the world. And let's be realistic here. And no coaches are recruiting over the holidays. They need to, coaches need to spend time with their family too. But one of the things that we tell our kids is, yeah, obviously, your focus is 100% on education. You got to make sure that you're keeping up your grades because the coaches aren't going to bring guys in that, are failing because they're not going to play. they're going to be suspended from the team. So why would they bring guys in that way? So education, and then just physically keep yourself strong, get in the weight room. I tell guys all the time, I'd rather see you in the weight room until February, and then we can pick up a bat in March. You'll see your numbers improve. Swinging a bat, yeah, it's important, but like 1,000,000 reps, I don't think so. It's kind of like riding a bike. You want bigger numbers? Get in the weight room. Get in the classroom. Train your mind, train yourself physically, and then the actual physical skills of the game will come. But then to set yourself apart from one of 1,000,000 grade 12s that are trying to go off to the next level is don't be afraid to make a phone call. Don't be the guy that just sends the email with the stock 5 pitches of your fastball, and then your changeup, and then your curveball, and then your 10 swings from front toss, because that's all you're going to show off because you don't want to fail on a video. Do that, but then call the coach and say, hey, coach, I wanted to let you know that I'm still really interested in your program. Here's my details. I almost guarantee that even if the coach already filled that recruiting spot, the fact that you got on the phone and called him and took the time to actually leave a message, even if he doesn't answer, or have a quick conversation with him, your name is still going to stay in that list. That if a spot opens and you haven't committed, or maybe you go to a school and it's just not the right fit, and now you want to transfer, because you left that line of communication open with that coach by giving him a call instead of waiting for him to initiate the call. That goes a long way, because they get thousands of emails. I mean, think about how many different programs there are for community college baseball, NAIA, NCAA Division 1, 2, 3, and then schools in Canada. There's hundreds of options, and each program has 25 to 40 or more players that are involved either on their junior varsity, or they were recruited and bailed out after fall or after day one. Or set yourself apart any way you can, and that's the biggest, easiest way to do it, beyond your physical ability, because everybody's kind of all on the same level. Like, how do you set yourself apart from that bubble guy? Is make a phone call. Don't rely on your coach, your club coach, or your head instructor at your facility to do all that work. Yes, we'll follow up. Yes, we'll reach out to them, but you got the same number just like I do. Give them a call. Say, hey, coach, I sent my information, hoping you got it. Do you have any other questions? Do you want more information? Do you want some more video? Don't be afraid to make a phone call.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice, Chris, especially for other athletes that want to be able to reach that next level. And yeah, be able to set yourself apart from the competition. Like you said, there's millions of other athletes out there competing to be the best that want to be able to reach that next level. So what are you doing that's different from the rest and 99% of the other athletes out there? So, a piece of advice I have for others too is, yeah, be able to communicate with coaches, be able to, do the extra work and be able to show the coach that you actually, want to invest yourself into that process. And like you said, just making a call can make a huge difference rather than just emailing them or hoping that they're going to notice you. So yeah, like another piece is also just importance of that exposure side of things. So like create a really good recruiting profile. That's a simple thing you can do. And with social media, it's never been easier. So, figure out, okay, how to make my videos actually look good, how to make them stand out. And then, yeah, be able to just send those off to different coaches, teams to gain yourself that exposure. Start making the connections, just start networking. And that can be a huge piece, especially down the line. If you go to school one year, things aren't working out the way you want. Okay, you have an option to possibly transfer. You have a connection here. So yeah, that's a great way that athletes can be able to set themselves apart from the competition and be able to reach that next level. So I want to ask you this question now, Chris, from your own experience, being an athlete, being a coach, what does performing at peak potential mean to you?
Well, mentally and physically being ready to go. You can, when you think about peak, that's, the highest point at any given at any given point in time, I guess, right? So to be at your peak level, you can't just physically be the best player. You can't be the 5 o'clock All-American that hits bombs in batting practice, but when the pitcher starts to actually pitch, you don't know what you're doing. You got a big hole in your swing, or you can't control your pitches when a hitter stands in the box, but you've got the best stuff on the mound in a bullpen. So to perform at your peak level requires a routine that you stick with every single opportunity. Maybe it varies slightly in your training because maybe you can't follow the exact same routine from training to game, but if you can blend those, that way the transition is a little bit easier that way. You want to make your training as game-like as you can. We mentioned it a little bit earlier. Failing in December is perfect because then you're exposing yourself to potential where that failure might come up in a game, and you either know how to handle it, or that exact situation comes up from December into a game, and because you now know what you did to correct it in December, it's no longer a failure in a game. So that's not only a physical thing, but that's a mental thing. That's remembering. That's having your notepad, having your goal setting each month or each day or each year. 2023, it's everybody does it January 1st. Everybody comes up with their goals for the year. Well, this is a perfect opportunity for those athletes that are starting to see themselves go into that next level, working themselves up from, a bubble AA, AAA kid to like maybe being the guy because of all the work they've put in. Set your goals now. You don't have to wait until January 1st. It's the 20th of December. So whenever this airs, we have a little bit of an idea on when we were talking about this, but start with your goals, stick to them, reassess them after each month if you're still on track, if you're not on track, whatever it is. In order to reach that peak potential, it's got to be more than just physically being the best one out there. You have to be mentally the best one out there. And then physically, if you're not quite there, you're still one step ahead of the next guy because mentally you're stronger than your competition. I'd gladly take a guy that's physically less strong, but mentally stronger 10 times out of 10 because the physical will come along. But mentally, he's already put that work and he's got that foundation built and he understands that failure is going to be part of it. Whereas you get the big, strong dude that doesn't know how to have a failure. He's not going to be performing at his peak. No way.
I couldn't agree more with that statement. Yeah, exactly. Especially relating to that point of talent, is talent only gets you so far in the sports world. You could be the most talented athlete when you're 13, but if you want to become a college athlete someday, just understand that there's millions of other athletes out there striving for the exact same thing. So yeah, again, what are you doing different? And especially when you get to those higher levels, is there's more stress, more pressure, higher expectations and standards, right? You can relate to that. Living that student athlete lifestyle and competing at the college level is you're going to be facing a lot more challenges than you think. And that's just a part of life. And you'll kind of realize that and just experience that as you go. Everyone does. But being able to handle those challenges with ease compared to letting them take control, right? Where you just end up spiraling, you lose complete focus, you can't control your emotions. That's a huge thing. And that's a big thing that coaches also look for as well. As a coach myself, when I look at athletes, whether it's recruiting, tryouts, I don't necessarily just look for how physically talented they are. I look, for, okay, how do they react when things don't go their way? How do they react when they're on the sidelines, when they're on the bench with their teammates? Are they throwing their stuff, having a temper tantrum, or are they staying positive, trying to lock back in and supporting their teammates moving forward? Because that's a huge thing, especially when you have a team, that team dynamic, that team chemistry. It can be very skewed if you have a couple players on the team, which I'm sure every team's like this in some way or another. But where the egos come in, right? And teammates are kind of clashing here and there, or coaches can't, get their points across, yeah, that mental side is huge, especially if you want to compete at the higher levels. Yeah, be able to set yourself apart from the competition. Yeah, do you have any advice now, I guess, for parents with athletes and, what you'd recommend to them, kind of if their athletes either coming up in the process or be able to kind of navigate that student athlete lifestyle a bit easier?
I think the biggest thing, regardless of what age that their kid is be hands-on in the development side of things. Don't be afraid to go play catch. I get far too many calls. I got a 4-year-old. Can we put him in a camp? It's like, or how about you grab a glove and you just go play catch with your kid? Be hands-on, but understand that the moment that they step on the field, the reason why I guess if the parent is also a coach, this is a different side of it, but if they're not a coach, you are trusting that coach, and you're trusting, or if you're at a training facility, you're trusting that instructor to help develop your kid, and trust that voice that they're getting that isn't mom or dad, that, let the kid learn from somebody else. They see mom and dad every single day. Or grandma, grandpa, or parents and guardians, whatever it is, they see them every single day. So having that outside voice is only going to benefit them. I like to think that in my career, I had my mom, I had my dad. They both coached me. I also had other coaches. Probably had 15, 20 different coaches. All those voices, yeah, maybe I agreed with some and maybe I disagreed with others, but you always take bits and pieces. It doesn't mean that you have to be, from a coach's standpoint, your word isn't always 100% correct. There is different ways to go about this. So parents, trust that the coaches that your kids are playing for or working with are going to give them bits of advice. It might not be the whole package. It might be, a little bit of information here or there. And then the kids can create a hybrid of information and figure out what works for them. I mean, I talk to our kids all the time. There's options all over the province here in southern Saskatchewan and up in Saskatoon. Go see what those coaches have to say. Just because this is a business doesn't mean I'm going to say we are the only way to do it, because I'm smarter than that. I'm a development-minded coach, and I just happen to have a position of this being a way to make a living. But I am 100% a believer in different opinions and different voices, and then figuring out what works. So from advice to parents, trust that the information that your kids are getting is going to go somewhere. Even if it's just one word out of a sentence, it's still going to help you. And then to have your kids work their way up in levels, you have to invest in them. You can't just expect that that the kid is going to get there without putting the work in. I love kids playing all the sports that they can. But it's kind of like being on the field. If you want to be really good at a bunch of spots, you have to potentially sacrifice a little bit one way. That's why you don't see many two-way players anymore. You don't see a lot of POs or a lot of pitchers and position players, just because they're sacrificing a little bit in their training. And from a parent's perspective, let them play all the sports that they can if they want, because the moment you say, no, you're only a hockey player, or no, you're only a baseball player, or no, you're only a basketball player, and you'd be surprised. You wouldn't think parents would do that, but it actually comes from the parents a lot of times, is the moment that they start burning out at the age of 12, 13, 14 years old. And then, they don't reach that potential at all because they weren't allowed to be kids. And that goes to a lot of coaches too. A lot of coaches say, nope, it's hockey 100% of the time, or it's baseball 100% of the time, or it's football 100% of the time. And then it's like, how can these kids still be kids? There is that line, and you have to tippy toe it sometimes and figure out, okay, maybe they do want to play baseball, so they got to lay off a little bit on the basketball or the football or the hockey. But some of the best athletes in the province right now are playing 4 sports. Like I can name multiple kids that are provincial level, any sport that they play, and they're still going to have an awesome opportunity to go on to the next level. So, yeah, I don't know. I probably went off a little bit on that one, but
No, I love that mindset and that perspective, Chris. And I feel like that's the best way to learn anything too. That's a big point of this podcast is gaining different perspectives from different people, different insights that you can utilize, you can pick and choose from to help your game, right? Like you say, not everything is going to work the same for everybody, but you got to be able to mold your own character, mold your own, performance and your strategy moving forward. But yeah, being able to play those multiple sports and gain different perspectives from different coaches, like you say, is huge. Because I just think of my experience competing. I was a football athlete, baseball, hockey, track and field, golf, basketball. Like we did it all. But I took different lessons from each different sport. Like example, football, that taught me about family. That taught me about brotherhood and being there for, someone that I care about, whatever it may be. Like I got your back, right? Same thing, brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever it may be, is we're a family and we're going to do this together. That built that teamwork, that identity, and that helped us so much more, especially in the baseball world. Hockey, where you can bring over that leadership and utilize those different lessons along the process. But yeah, also just touching on your point of burnout, especially. I see it with so many athletes as a coach. Growing up, I saw it with so many of my friends. And as an athlete and not a parent, I can kind of say this, but yeah, let your kids play multiple sports and learn those different lessons. But just understand that sports are supposed to be fun. And I feel like that's the thing I see nowadays with a lot of kids is sure, you want to be able to maximize your potential, your performance, right? Be able to play in the pros one day. That's an awesome goal to have. But you got to have fun in the process too, because there's so many athletes, and I see this especially within the hockey world, and this is just because where we're located. So many people think, okay, my kid's going to the NHL, my kid's going to the show, and I know as a parent, you always want to support your kid, right? And be there for them, of course. But you also got to understand that this is just a game. We're trying to have fun, right? If you're coming home every day, and yeah, you never had a good game, and then you're kind of going down that rabbit hole and having the talks on the way home. Because as an athlete, I've been there, I can relate. But just supporting your athlete along that process. And I think, for example, like Braden and Luke Shen, so they're located from where I'm from in Saskatoon, and they are athletes in the NHL today, very successful athletes growing up. But when they grew up playing youth sports, they only competed in the mid tiers. They were only like tier 2 compared to playing at the citywide level. And so many other athletes that they competed with, because I've had this, conversation with them and others, is that their friends were burnt out by the time they even got to the high school level. They didn't enjoy the sport anymore. They were just so fed up with it because, and I played at that, high level too, where you're practicing. I remember there were 6 a.m. practices before school. And I remember I was like 12 years, 13 years old. I'm like, this sucks. Like, I don't want to get up early. I don't want to do this. Right. And, it's just a competition and you got to win. And there's no time for failure or loss. And, that burnout piece is huge, especially with athletes getting to that next level and understanding, Braden and Luke Shen, they never competed at the highest levels, but they still could compete. They were great athletes, but they could have fun in the process too. And I feel like you got to really have that balance to see success, and especially go the distance in the long run. Because sports, every single day they're getting more hectic, longer seasons. Like you said, the kind of academy format, higher fees every year, more tournaments, more games, more travel. It all adds up in the end, and it can be very detrimental. And I'm saying this from my experience as a high performing athlete growing up. I'm sure you can relate to, Chris, but I feel like that's super critical in the long run, living that athlete lifestyle.
I think the biggest thing too, just to kind of add on to that is, if a player does go from the youth level into the high performance pre-college or college prep, whatever you call it, and then they go into college, we have this conversation with a lot of our seniors, and it's like, take advantage of being a high school kid now, because if you're going to university or you're going to college or you're going to play baseball, obviously we're, baseball facility, we're talking baseball or softball for that matter. There is that whole term of no days off is where it's going to really kick in. You've got 6 a.m. workouts, and you've got school from 8 till 1, and then you got practice 2 till 5, and then you got study hall 6 till 8, and then you've got to figure out, what am I going to eat, when am I going to do homework that I can't finish in study hall, when am I going to get a chance to just experience university or college life outside of a baseball field or outside of a classroom. And then not to mention, when you get into the season, you've got that, but then you've got games on weekends or midweek games or non-conference or whatever it is. If you're burning yourself out by following that kind of schedule at the age of 13 until you're the age of 17, 18 going off to school, sure, you've prepped yourself for that lifestyle, but do you want to continue doing that for another 4 years? Some people do, yeah. But in a lot of cases, it's like, maybe I'll just enroll at the University of Regina or University of Saskatchewan, and maybe I'll just live at home for a couple of years, and maybe I'll have a gap year, and then maybe I'll try when I'm 19, and then all of a sudden, kids get burnt out, and then they're all of a sudden like, hey, this is what it's like to be a high school kid, except now they're in university, and they have to find a job, and they have to pay off their student debts and this and that, right? So, yeah, you nailed it. I mean, it's if they start that heavy load lifestyle at a young age, it's like they're going through that grind of a university or college life or pro life, because that's what it would be if you get on even beyond that. But at such a young age that physically and mentally, they just can't handle it. And that's where the whole travel baseball and academy format, and that's where everything is running towards, because the more kids they get through their doors, the more games they play, the more training they do, the more they can charge, the more money they can make. And then the more names can go on a wall of fame that they went off to play college ball, but you don't see the names that should be pulled off that if the kids burn out after a week and come home, you know what I mean? So, and there's lots of situations that can happen. It's not always burnout. There's lots of things that could happen. But you just want to put your kids in the best opportunities to be successful, and that's not overdoing it at such a young age.
For sure. I completely agree with that, Chris. And that's a big thing, and I feel like a huge misconception, especially when you get to that college level, is the student athlete lifestyle is a grind. It's not easy. It's essentially a job, school, trying to, manage everything, your social life as well, trying to have fun, trying to stay positive through the process. And it's just so much, right? For a university student in general, it's already stressful. It's already hectic when you got exams, when you're learning chapters and days compared to weeks. Your professors, they don't care if you show up or not. It's on you to get the assignments done, right? You don't have that mom and dad support like you did at home. It's up to you, right? And that's a huge jump for so many athletes. That's what I realized too after going through my college athlete experience is I was someone in high school that could get away studying the night before, getting 80s and 90s. I was a good student, could manage all my sports that I was competing at year round. But when I got to that next level, okay, I couldn't study the night before anymore. Now I actually had to make myself meals to, right, put on weight and increase mass. That was my goal. And then, yeah, be able to study, find time to study and stay consistent, motivated, and positive through that process. It can be so difficult. And I see so many athletes every single year that, like you say, they commit to the college level and they end up either burning out or something else happens and they get homesick. I've seen that too. And right, they come home after a month or two and like I said, they're working a job and that's kind of their athletic career, and just how much can change in such a short amount of time. But you got to understand that process, right? It needs to be gradual and consistent. Of course, if you want to get to the next level, you got to be able to put in the work, right? You got to be able to do extra to set yourself apart from the competition, but understand too that balance piece is key, because if you go past your limits, where it's just stress all the time, you're not enjoying it, well, you're not going to push through. If you're not passionate about it, you're not going to put the effort in. So, right, there's so many different factors that can influence your performance as an athlete. And I feel like that's a huge misconception, especially, athletes that want to go to the pro level someday. Is, of course, every athlete has those dreams, and that's awesome. I want to see you succeed and get there as well. But you got to understand, it's a long process. It's a lot of work, and mentally, it is a grind, right? Physically as well, but being able to, like I said before, manage all those pressures, those failures, those expectations, which only increase. If you're not able to handle them at a younger age, right, it's going to be super difficult as you move on as well. But yeah, as we kind of close this podcast here, Chris, I just want to, ask you if you could go back and do anything different through your college athlete experience, your student athlete experience growing up. What is one thing that you do different in order to reach your highest potential and be able to maximize your performance as an athlete, whether that's on or off the field?
Well, initially, the first thing I think of is, so I played as many sports as I could. I would never change that because we just talked about that. I would probably put just more of a focus on the mental side. I know, like I said earlier, I was always kind of a routine driven guy, and I knew that would kind of get me back on track. But going even beyond the affirmations and the breathing and that, actually putting that, maybe getting a mental coach. There was nothing like that. In fact, when I went to, so I was in Monterey 2009, 2010. I actually went, and I was a psychology major. And I told my counselor, my academic counselor, I said, I want to be a sports psychologist. I want to work with teams. I want to do the mental conditioning. That's why, like, you and I talking is like, this is the best thing ever. I wanted to do the mental conditioning thing. And so this is in 2010. And you might not remember in 20, but there wasn't a whole lot of, there wasn't a really big demand for this. Like, you kind of had to be with a professional organization in the mental side of things to make a career of this. Now, obviously, looking back, if I would have stuck with it, obviously I wouldn't be in the position I'm in. But there's a massive demand. You can't, every professional athlete has their own mental conditioning coach, along with a strength conditioning coach, dietitian, whatever. But they actually convinced me, my academic advisor convinced me to go into something that there's more of a demand of. So what did I do? I'll do the exercise physiology. I'll do PT. I'll work with injured athletes because they're always getting injured. So I had a exercise physiology degree that I graduated with. Now I run a baseball training facility. But had I gone back, maybe I would put extra emphasis on the mental side of things and actually continue that push to do the sports psychology or do the psychology-based thing in sports, because you can never work on the mental side of things too much. There's always going to be a challenge that you're going to experience that you've never experienced in your life. Think about it. You go through your day-to-day, and there's always a situation that comes up that you've never experienced in your life. The same thing happens on a baseball field or a basketball court or a hockey on the ice or whatever. There's always something that, until you actually experience it in game, you might have never experienced it before. A ball that pops this direction because it hits this rock with a runner in this position. And to have the mental conditioning, the mental coach or whoever working with you saying, hey, these are the potentials that could happen. Let's work through them. But then let's also figure out, that happened, you failed. What can we do? How can we flush it? I would probably put more emphasis on being more knowledgeable in the mental side of it versus routine. like I said, I was pretty good that way, but actually like focused in on it, I think I probably do that.
Yeah, that's a great insight and perspective there, Chris. And I agree with you there. That's one thing I definitely wish I would have worked on more growing up, is that mental side. Because like you say, is just that the changes. There's so many challenges and failures you're going to face along that process. Whether it's today, tomorrow, a week from now, they're guaranteed to come, and that's any process, right? That's life. But being able to manage it makes it so much easier to stay consistent, stay motivated, stay positive moving forward, rather than, yeah, getting into that negative mindset. Um, that low self-esteem, low confidence. I can relate. I've been there growing up, especially through that student athlete lifestyle. But yeah, really working on that mental game, and implementing that is huge, especially for athletes that want to get to the next level. And yeah, that was a big reason in creating the grind performance and being able to help athletes with the mental aspect of the game and be able to, have chats like this, is understanding that, okay, the physical side is super important, but if you don't have that mental side at the next level, it's going to be so much more difficult for you, right? And it's going to be hard for you to be able to set yourself apart from the competition. So yeah, I just want to thank you for that insight and perspective there, Chris. And yeah, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us on the Grind Road to Success podcast, and share your knowledge, insights, and yeah, everything else that I know so many athletes can benefit from.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I think the biggest thing is, it's good to have the one time mental conditioning here or there, but the key is to stick with it. Just like you physically stick with it in the gym or physically stick with it on the turf with your skill development. Create those routines and stick with it. And when you feel like you don't want to, just keep going through, grind through it, like you might say. And that's when you're going to start seeing yourself break through those barriers and keep on climbing.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it, Chris. Yeah, I really enjoyed this talk today. I feel like it can benefit so many others, no matter what sport you're playing. So yeah, I want to thank you again for taking your time to sit down with us today.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Hey, if you enjoyed today's episode, then make sure to share it with a teammate or friend. And as always, never settle for average and keep on striving to reach your highest potential on the grind road to success.